So I'm very happy to introduce our speaker today, which is Robin, well known to you as a neurofeedback specialist, first of all, then probably famous for her work with Anna Weiss and her love to horses, and now also famous for introducing mind mirror work to her trauma clients, and that's what we are going to talk about today. So I personally was looking forward to this program because Robin is a very good member of our community, exactly, very professional, very intelligent, very, I think, passionate about what she is doing, very knowledgeable. So it's always a pleasure to have, such good speakers in our program. So welcome, Robin. And if Judith would like to say anything else, you're also welcome to add before we pass the word to Robin.
Well, I guess one thing I'd like to say is how accomplished Robin is in so many different ways, not just the realm of her expertise with trauma clients and horses and everything, but she just has this incredibly intuitive and logical approach to the mind mirror, and she fully understands, having worked with lots of other different kinds of equipment, the power of the software, and has used it to not even to the fullest extent, but the best extent in the way that she's managed to pull together record keeping. So it's a real thrill, and I'm so happy that, Robin, with the busy life that you have, that you could take time to do this for us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think I've been trying to figure out how to utilize all the things that my mirror can do. It's mind-boggling, and I've tried to set up record keeping in a way that I can go back and find information when I want to see it. And I had to do a lot of moving of files today, so I'm hoping I will be able to find the things that I want to find, but we'll just go with it. So I started off and just put together a few slides, and I'm hoping that I can build on this, maybe make this into a bigger and better presentation in the future. But the reason I was so interested in the mind mirror is for using it with my trauma clients who have been doing psychotherapy for a long period of time, and some trauma clients have a really hard time going down deep without becoming very anxious. And so for me, this is another tool for helping people to uncover personal information without becoming overwhelmed or re-traumatized. And for a psychotherapist, I think that's really important. The reason that I got interested in the mind mirror in the first place was to try to extend my work with clients into a realm of health, because when clients first come to see me, they often have big issues, and they may work with me for a period of years, and yet they haven't developed the tools for being introspective on their own without somebody else being present. And so learning how to meditate can help develop their brainwave patterns and also their brainwave pathways so that they're less anxious when they look at inside. My group was set up to help people follow a new path that isn't involved with a back and forth take just with the psychotherapist, but to teach them how to go inside and meditate and uncover their own process information that their own subconscious can provide. So I started the group with 4 people who have already gone through 5 two-hour sessions. So they went through the 5 beginning training sessions that I used for my practitioner training. And the group now meets weekly, and we've had 12 sessions, and there's a structure, and everybody comes in and they're slowly learning how to put electrodes on each other. They haven't quite gotten that together yet, but we leave 30 minutes in the beginning just to talk to each other and to set up and get the electrodes on. We do a 45-minute meditation. Sometimes it's a little longer. and I always try to leave at least 5 to 10 minutes of the meditation where people can go inside and there isn't a guided portion for 5 to 10 minutes each session. And then we have about 30 minutes for clients to write down their meditation experience. And they usually will write, the level of imagery they had, their landmarks, and their reactions to it. And then we share. Because a lot of my clients are working on their own deep issues, and the group itself is just forming, we are not sharing a lot of personal details within the group. Those details are often kept on the individual summary sheets that the clients write following the session. And if they choose to share something, it's usually a little bit more general. But it still has provided a developing sense of connection with everybody in the group. And it's a very positive, fun place. I'm really enjoying these groups. I think the clients are enjoying them, and I'm really enjoying it. It's very exciting. Every week, everybody has interesting information in their summary reports. After the session, I generate a My Mirror summary, and I email it to everybody. So these are morphing and changing. A lot of times I just don't have time to go through and look in great detail at everybody's report, so they'll get a My Mirror summary. If there's a particular place that something interesting was occurring, I try to take a snapshot of that and send it to them. And maybe I'll give a couple of sentence feedback on how their meditation brainwave patterns have changed. And really, the group is very open. The goals have not been set for anybody. I haven't described how I want the group to go, or what people are supposed to learn, or what should come up. It's really designed just to allow people the time to meditate, to deepen their meditation with a teeny bit of direction and no pressure at all. Because I don't want them to have feedback in a way that they're feeling they need to be progressing to a higher level, because that misses the point, really, for me, of the whole purpose of meditating, which is just to be with whatever happens to come up. So I have an introductory handout, and I prepared a handout for all of the clients so that they could learn a little bit in advance before they started the group about what is the awakened mind, what brainwaves create the awakened mind pattern. Most clients don't have any idea what we're talking about. I talk with them a little bit about what we'll see on the computer and how that compares to the awakened mind brainwave pattern. And then I go into some detail with them about the different frequencies and what they do, so that they have a beginning idea. I encourage everybody to buy Anna Wise's books in the hope that they can answer some of their own questions through reading. And then, what's the awakened mind brainwave profile? Why are we doing this? People have no idea and feel very anxious in that first brainwave profile, because they're finding out what their brainwaves are like for the first time. And so I try to make that very, comfortable and easy. And we talk about what the keys are, the landmarks, the centralization scale, the purpose of the different sensors, the GSR, the blood volume sensor, and the temperature, and then how we're going to work all of this together. So I'm happy to share that handout with anybody that would like to use it for their own clients, because I think it's really important to have a map, an overall understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, and what clients can find out through the different sensors and equipment. Of course, with 4 people, we're just doing the EEG, but they've all gone through that brainwave profile, and so all of that information helps them to put it all together. For each group session, I've also made a handout for them. I am drawing on these 3 pictures And I just try to get 3 drawings for each client throughout the 45 minutes, since I've got 4 people meditating at the same time. And then later, I might write what I see in terms of the peak frequencies of the different brainwave categories, but I'll go back and check and write down what the my mirror summary says here and what training level they're in. And I ask them to fill in the landmarks and the centralization scale. So that pretty much takes care of how we do the record keeping with each session with the group. So as I said, these are the meditations that everybody has completed before they've entered the group. And I think what I'm going to do is I have somebody that's going to be leaving this summer, and I'm already looking for the next person to fill in for that spot. I'm hoping just to keep people rolling through, but I'll have to find time to do these meditations for that person so that they can fit into the group and participate equally with everybody else who's already been there for 12 sessions. So we're trying to figure out how to make that transition smooth, and be curious as to how that goes, because we've just started feeling like we're a group, and it's kind of sad that somebody's leaving at this point. The list of meditations now is here that we've done throughout the 12 weeks. We started with one of Anna Wise's deep relaxation meditations for the beginning. We did a hemispheric balancing because I was noticing that there were quite a few people, who were either right-sided or left-sided. And everybody loved that meditation, and it was incredibly helpful. And then we followed it with the River of Life, which is another deep relaxation meditation. We did the Healing Garden, Qualities of Mastery. And then I have another book that describes all of the chakras in the body, and the fragrances and the gemstones and the glands and the etheric body and the auric body, all of the different energy layers that the specific chakra is connected to. And those have produced some really wonderful meditations for people and insights. So we did the root, the sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat. We did a personal transformation in between. I had just one client that day. We have people just floating through. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 1. So we did a personal transformation that day, and then brow chakra and another personal transformation. And the personal transformation is probably one of the most fantastic meditations anybody can do, and it always produces a lot of insight for the clients. They love it. I think we'll probably be doing more of those. So I just decided to identify the members, since I can't use their names, and I'm really trying to leave out a lot of personal detail, by their brainwave signatures. And client A is a 56-year-old right-handed female physical therapist. She's had a lot of years of meditation training and shamanic training. And she tends to have very strong alpha, oftentimes out to 50 microvolts. But of course, there's a lot of variation depending on what phase of a meditation she's in. And as she generates more evolved mind flares, you see the alpha coming in. Client B is a 60-year-old left-handed female, is a retired physician. And she's also had a lot of years of meditation. And she tends to be mostly, this is her sort of signature pattern, but she often is showing evolved mind flares. So she has a more less amplitude in her brainwave patterns. Client C is a 36-year-old right-handed female. She used to be a yoga instructor, and she's now a full-time parent. She tends to have a lot of anxiety, and you can see that there's a lot of activity above alpha, where alpha isn't, she has nice strong alpha, but with all of that fast activity, it's hard for her to become grounded and stay in a meditation, and she's constricted in through here. Client D is a 46-year-old right-handed female who has also very little meditation experience, and she came in wanting to know, sure that she wasn't going to be able to be successful with meditation, and she has incredible alpha and an amazing ability to centralize. She tends to be also, everybody here tends to be anxious. Sometimes everybody's alpha frequencies are at 12.5 rather than down at 10.5 or lower. But she has been able to stay with the meditation more successfully as time has gone by. And I think we used some of your ideas, Judith, about just trying to be with her body sensations, if her heart is feeling uncomfortable, by being more aware of other body sensations, not always focusing on the one that's disturbing. And the guided meditation is very helpful for her, because it's when she gets really quiet that she becomes much more aware of what's going on within her.
Robin, before you leave, can I ask you a question? Why
Yeah.
did you write down right-handed, left-handed? What significance did you feel that has?
Well, I was curious as to whether when they're dominant left or right-brained, if it would show up. Sometimes we pay attention to that with neurofeedback training, and I can't say with all the different meditations we've done whether it really makes a difference, but I just like to keep in mind what somebody's dominant hand is.
It's on the brainwave profile that Anna asked us to put that, and I never did really know why. I assume, is it that a right-handed person tends to be more left brain dominant and
Often.
vice versa?
Yes, often. I'm right brain dominant and left-handed. And also because, with those combinations, sometimes a right-brained individual tends to have a certain personality style that's going to be different from a left-brained personality. So I tend to fit the mold of somebody who has more difficulty being systematic and is more divergent in my thinking and processing, and rather than I start somewhere and expand and follow a trail and go from one topic to another, whereas somebody who's left-brained might want to start at the top and very systematically be able to organize in an outline fashion rather than more of a deductive process.
That's a really kind of an interesting question, because I think the statistic is something that 75% of people are left-brained. And I know that most people are right-handed, so that would be very interesting if it turns out that the left brain analytical dominance tends to come from being right-handed or vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting question for some neurophysiologist.
That was just my introduction of the group. So I just was trying to find a way to follow the clients through their different sessions and to look at the brainwave patterns and see how they changed over time, to see in fact if what's changing for each person. And for this is the client who's the physical therapist, and if you look at the awakened mind patterns over time, you can see that she is, where she is the strongest in her meditation in terms of what training level, and how she changes over time. So from, say, at level 5, the awakened mind pattern started at 58%, and it was much greater what she was meditating the river of life, which is very relaxing. Animal sensualization is a little bit lower. House of Doors is a meditation which is more active, and it's understandable, therefore, that she might be a little bit lower in that pattern there. Personal transformation is higher, though, and I think that's because of the being in the awakened mind state for that meditation. That meditation really encourages that. And then the brow chakra that we were doing was a kind of, it turned out to be a kind of peculiar meditation, and everybody had a lower percentages than they had in the past. It was kind of a, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't a typical, very different type of meditation. There was not a lot of clear imagery. There was a lot of misty imagery in the third eye. So for this client, we could then see if we wanted to look at her meditation pattern over time and to see how that's changed. And again, from the level 7 or 8 being where she was very successful, level 7 is what she was working on in the meditation pattern. And we can see how that increased over time, starting at 64%, going up to 92%, and again with the brow chakra. Now, I didn't do this for the other 11 sessions. At some point, if I were really going to try to follow everything, I would do that, but there isn't time, basically, to do that and get information out to people. And over time, I noticed that everybody's gamma synchrony increased pretty dramatically. So at level 4, it went from 9% to 23%, 52% to 63%. So I did that for each client, and I just wanted to share and show. It's pretty remarkable to look and see that this particular client, who's the retired physician, who's a great meditator, went from a level 4, 3% of the awakened mind to 38% by the end, which is pretty amazing. I mean, I just think it's from at level 5, 30% to 91% by the end.
That's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, and people likewise with this. People are reporting full conditions. So internet connection is now unstable. So I'm not sure if there's a purpose to share any more of this in particular, but this was a file that I got from Andrea Groh, and I think it's a really useful file for tracking information. And she shows at the bottom, enforced symmetry. We're not doing that. We figure we'd be a long ways off before anybody would want to try to be worried about meditating so well, so I haven't used that yet. Any thoughts about that? Or?
Well, I mean, you have the scores for enforced symmetry there in the training summary. There are a lot of self-trainers who are training with enforced symmetry, and it works beautifully for them. But for your clientele, if they were self-training using the audio rewards, using that enforced symmetry from the get-go might prove to be, a source of frustration for them. Anyway, you're not doing the self-training method. You're actually guiding them in meditation. So.
Right, which is interesting too, to see that they're changing as much as they are through the repetition and the group and the guided meditation without the feedback.
Indeed.
It's really pretty amazing. So I'm not sure what would be useful in terms of sharing about running the groups or details of the groups. There's just such a wealth of information for every client going through, and it's a bit overwhelming. I could share a teeny bit about how each client changed. We could look at the screen and just kind of go through, but there's just so much information. This client up here was the retired physician, and because she had had a brain injury, she was needing stabilization and had not been able to get alpha imagery going on her own. And so she's doing other neurofeedback for the brainwave stabilization, but felt that she wasn't really going to get what she wanted until she practiced meditating. And so she was one of the people that really motivated me to get going on my training. she's found that she's recovered her capacity to create alpha and have wonderful imagery and go inside. And in fact, in the last meeting that we had, she was able to connect to a guide of hers that she has not connected with internally since before her accident 12 years ago. And that's, you know, following only 12 meditation sessions in the group. So that's pretty amazing. So needless to say, she's been really excited. And when she goes into thinks about light or feels light in her body, her brainwave patterns usually generate a little bit more gamma. And she also loses her alpha during a bit of that time. And she just has a very quiet, almost straight up and down EEG pattern. And it's almost predictable that when I see that on the screen, she's in a state of bliss and doesn't really want to come back. She just wants to hang out in that particular state.
That straight up and down pattern, is she going out of body?
She feels like she has. And I do have I just wanted to show that in here where I was following her meditation, this was one of those places where her pattern got really narrow. And in this particular meditation, it was when it was her brainwave profile, and I was doing the empathic connection with her. And she went into that pattern. But the other time that she went into it was when in the river of life towards the end, where she was floating and floating, and she said she felt like she had floated out of her body. And at that same place, the blood volume pulse dropped really low at the exact same place where she developed that pattern. So we've been trying to follow that and have been noticing that there tends to be more gamma for her when she's making this pattern, and her blood volume pulse does drop down. Does that make sense, Judith, in terms of out of body?
It makes total sense.
You know, in terms of out of body experiences, OBEs, usually there's the amplitude drops below 3 microvolts.
Okay. I doubt it's that low.
Yeah, so if you see a flat line like that at 3 microvolts or less, which runs into machine noise on the old mind mirrors, you know, then people tend to have true out-of-body experiences.
Okay.
Rather than a depersonalization or something like that.
What would you define as a depersonalization?
Just kind of disidentifying who they are or where they are. It's a more technical term, but it's, you know, just that idea of not being present, not being in the body, but it's not actually being out of body. You know, it's not the type of astral projection that we're looking at. It's just a way of feeling separated from yourself, from your body. And so, you know, I found that the true OBEs tend to be very low microvolts, at least in our experience, you know, which is, again, somewhat limited, but you don't run into people like that very often, particularly when they're doing a meditation, or at least for us anyway.
How long does that tend to last like that?
Well, we were just talking to Judith about this. We were working with a woman who's been studying shaman, traveling to underworld, overworld, etc. for quite some time. And she was in that state for something like 15 minutes.
Wow.
Before she came back again.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that a number of workshops, particularly with Anna. Some people will just sort of disappear from the screen when we're monitoring them. Of course, at that time we have to switch. We're doing, you know, maybe 9 people at a time. So we're switching from one person to another. So we'll just kind of switch to them, see that they're, you know, flatline. We're like, oh, okay, they're probably out of body, and go on to someone else and draw that picture. That, you know, the old system was that we would have to draw the picture quickly, as we switched from one person to another. We didn't have all of these niceties that we have on the Mind Mirror 6. So it's hard to follow sometimes to see exactly what was going on.
And that would be complicated with the old switch box. The minute you switched it, then the brain waves all disappeared. So you had to wait 7 seconds for the brain to come back. So I guess you're saying that you waited those 7 seconds and they were still not.
Yeah, that always drove us crazy. You know, it's like, oh, do we have to sit here and wait for this brainwave pattern to come up again? You know, the Mind Mirror 6 is so much more user-friendly, let's say. The old.
Continuous monitoring, you can't beat that. But you know, this brings up something else in my mind about this depersonalization versus out of body. And Anna did talk about that in those drawings that she did, these sheets of drawings that we all look at. And she said that she was monitoring a guy one time, and he showed the out of body pattern, and he stayed in it for a whole lot of the time. And she later asked him, so what was he doing? He says, well, he just disappeared, that he was a fireman and his wife had died 2 weeks earlier, and he found that he just disappeared a lot. And so it seems like you're saying, Gary, and this makes more sense, that he wasn't actually out of body, he was depersonalizing. But this is an interesting concept, and you know, that differentiation would be, I'd like to learn more about it. So out of body, flatline, but maybe depersonalization, and flatline below 3 microvolts, but maybe depersonalization is just any microvoltage straight up and down. Would that be the difference?
Yeah, that's, you know, our sample body is so small, our data package is so small, it's hard to draw, you know, big conclusions from these things. Those are just things that we've seen. So, you know, it would be nice to have people collecting this data from several different sources and then comparing notes as to what's going on here.
Yeah.
So all I can say in our experience, people who were below 3 microvolts generally said, I was out of body. And they, you know, they had separated to the point where they didn't remember what they were doing, or as we were saying the other day, clicked out as they do in the Monroe work. So, you know, there wasn't loss of awareness of what was happening. In fact, they had agency. They were directing what they wanted to do and where they wanted to go. So that's a big difference, I think, between depersonalization and actually being out of body consciously.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and another thing that's real interesting about this empathy pattern of your clients, Robin, is the fact that she's gaining gamma when she does this. So if you can see that she's got this upturned delta and this big band of 1.5 delta. So clearly, you know, she's down, she's so far down that gamma seems to be riding on top of that delta. And, you know, I would be very surprised if she didn't blow into a evolved mind pattern, you know, at some point, because that does seem to be the mechanism, is that if alpha drops, theta increases, delta increases, you get that, sometimes alpha stays, but you get that upturned delta for that bottom half of that evolved mind pattern, or part of that evolved mind pattern. That's when I see the gamma frequencies increase.
Yeah, I'm looking at these two, well, you can't see me, but the two graphs at the end here. It almost looks like your famous diamond. Yeah, those two. Diamond pattern is beginning to develop there.
Yeah.
Alpha came out a little bit more. Yeah. And I am not quite sure. What do you find related to this diamond pattern? What's happening there? I haven't really noticed it a lot.
Well, when I was doing my independent study work with Anna, all of my 5 people tended to be were advanced meditators, psychics, and intuitives. Somehow that's always the people I ended up with. And I kept seeing this diamond, and I asked Anna, well, what is this thing? And she just kind of blew it off and said, well, they just don't have enough theta. But you can see, contrary to that, that they actually do have enough theta. In fact, they have more theta. So I think she wasn't paying much attention to it, just didn't think about my question. And what I have found through the years is that when you see this diamond pattern, that people report at that point that they were feeling like they were in their higher self. They were in definitely a higher state of consciousness, way more expanded. And you can see that topmost theta band is almost the same amplitude as that alpha, her lowest alpha band, which I guess is 9. Well, it is 9. And so there's this merging where they're in this really intense healing state. And in neurofeedback, that's where I got that terminology of the crossover, being at that lowest alpha and the highest theta band being almost the same amplitude. And so we know from other studies that that's where healing occurs, right smack there, and neurofeedback says the same thing. So I think there's some legitimacy to this higher state, higher self thing. But then also, one time I was reading, probably for the 10th time, Max Cade's book, and I found in the illustrations at the very back of the book that was Max Cade's brainwave pattern. His default brainwave pattern was that diamond. So
it's interesting.
He's definitely a higher soul. I imagine to say that he operated in his higher self would not be an exaggeration at all.
So Gary, when you're doing your groups, what are you doing research, or are you running groups that are ongoing?
Well, basically, when we've done groups, it hasn't been for research purposes. It's just been training, the Awaken Mind training. And so a lot of this, particularly in the old days with the Mind Mirror 3, all of this data was essentially lost because we would just do quick sketches of things and then hand them out to the people afterwards with some explanations as to what was happening at the time. Anna had reams of drawings, but with no particular notes, or not knowing, what was being done at the time. So in terms of trying to figure out what she was drawing or what her notes were all about, it would have been impossible in terms of research. Only the Mind Mirror 6 allows, and I love that spreadsheet that you're using there, because I've been talking to some other people who want to do some research, and just being able to put out that spreadsheet like that on Excel and then hand it over to a statistician, they would just go bananas with all those numbers, and they would say, oh, this is marvelous, whereas this was not available in the past. So no, I haven't, at the moment, we haven't been doing any research for the Mind Mirror 6, so we're kind of looking at it down the road here. And I'm really impressed with what you're doing. And I love your templates, and I wish you could share them.
I'd be happy to. So when you're doing the Awaken Mind training, you're doing the introductory or a series of training sessions, or a weekend?
Yes, we're doing generally 2-day workshops.
Okay.
And just doing what we would have done at Esalen, running through all of the various meditations that Anna used to help develop an awakened mind, or increase alpha, or whatever it is the person happened to need at the time. So it's Judith knows what the training protocol is. So we're basically just using Anna's training protocol. Looks pretty much like what you're doing too.
Yeah.
Except that she's got a variation there where instead of having, and I'm not sure you came in at the beginning of this, Gary, and heard this, but instead of taking members out of the general public, she is taking her trauma clients just to repeat that. Yeah, so she's using the same people each week, which is really cool. And so she's not using the straight, they've already done the protocol.
Right.
Yeah, so she's varying it, which makes it even more interesting. The
Yeah,
variation, like
definitely, definitely.
completely
Uh,
non-awake.
because we were just generally working with naive subjects straight off the street who may or may not have been meditating beforehand, and running them through Anna's protocol and calling it good. So we weren't really doing any research or anything therapeutic for the people, though some of the people obviously needed it. And I would suggest someone look that way, that they go into neurofeedback, someone who had the clinical neurofeedback capabilities.
Yeah, so I'm really enjoying the application of this with a psychotherapy, because everybody who is in this group is used to the psychotherapeutic process, and so the work that they do and the changes that they're making are really phenomenal. As I said about Ray, it's my friend. As I said about which one is she? She's client B, who was able to connect with her guide, and this client here tends to have a ton of gamma, and it really helped me, Judith, to have that conversation with you about gamma people, because I do think that that's a painful problem that she has, with a lot of heart palpitations and discomfort and over arousal. So trying to help her just become more settled in her body is been her process, and she's still struggling with it, but I think she's actually having some periods in her meditations now where she's feeling calm all the way in her body for a little bit at a time, and she's able to have some insights, so that's pleasing to her. The other client who hadn't had very much experience with meditation at all has had absolutely profound changes from really being a very easily overwhelmed individual by circumstances and environment, and even other people's emotions that are in the room or events that happen around the world could be very destabilizing. And that's changed dramatically, where there's a sense of groundedness and capacity to be with emotion and to not be overwhelmed by other people's emotions or what's happening in the world. So that's been a dramatic change for that client.
That sounds very much like someone I worked with a while back, unfortunately not with any awakened mind or neurofeedback, but with heart rate variability, who had TBI or MTBI in the automobile accident. And she was having very similar situations that you're describing. So, she's been able to actually improve by doing the meditations and get beyond that. The person I was working with was also in therapy with other counselors, and I kept referring her, saying, we have friends that have clinical neurofeedback, and I kept referring her to the neurofeedback, but it was something that she couldn't seem to get together or get into, because I really felt she needed it with a brain injury. But I'm interested in seeing that she had symptoms that were very, very similar to what you're describing here with this 2D.
So let me see, this client 4A was not able to manage psychotherapy without becoming completely overwhelmed to the point of becoming decompensated. And so we had made an agreement initially not to do any typical traditional psychotherapy or uncovering work, but just do neurofeedback for a period of time. And even so, with a year of neurofeedback, still there wasn't really that capacity to go into trauma without being overwhelmed. And since we've been doing the group meditations, things have shifted, and I don't know whether it's just the energy field of being with other people who are meditating, or whether it's her own increased stability, but she's able now to work with her issues and her past trauma from childhood symbolically using that personal transformation meditation, and has, located a child part within a part of her body, and went home and worked with that for a number of weeks on her own, and experienced light coming in, and that part left. And then later in another meditation, a healed part, or a part more receptive to healing, developed within. So that's also been a very dramatic and interesting change. So I just feel like the group work is limitless in terms of its value, and I hope to have more than one group going in the future. But I'm sure this group will just continue because everybody's enjoying it and feeling supported and seeing a lot of change. I am not really, I don't have specific places to go through in these meditations. Do you want to look at any actively, or call it a day in terms of talking about the group work?
Well, we're all addicts for wanting to see live brainwaves, and if you want to press play, I'd be delighted to see what's going on. You might want to change the attenuation on the bottom right one from 100 down to something closer.
Yeah, hers go.
Oh, you've got them on auto attenuate.
Okay, what's this with the brow chakra meditation?
I was surprised to hear that their scores weren't as good on that one, because I would have thought that focusing on that third eye area, but I wonder if that's what generated more gamma, and if their gamma synchrony scores were better than their awakened mind scores. Well, the best way to tell is just what we're doing right now. So this girl on the bottom right, she's got a serious gamma band at 59. Doesn't look like artifact because it's changing shape.
Mm-hmm.
She's got an evolved mind bottom there. No, that's not artifact. She's definitely got, look at the bottom. Wow. Okay, that was a really nice pattern right there. It might be that, so can you, the top right, will you left click in there and zoom in on her a little bit more so we can look at, yeah, okay, that's great. All right, so she doesn't have the gamma, but she's definitely got higher state patterns going on there, doesn't she?
Yeah, they all do.
Yeah, they all do. She's got a diamond. Look at her diamonds in that top right. Oh, beautiful evolved mind flares. So I think it's really curious that every brain is like a different fingerprint, and some people have got gamma that arises when they have a lot of amplitude down at the bottom. I was somehow to somebody mentioning that I just did this, well, to you, Gary, I was saying that I just monitored this guy in Philadelphia who had this unbelievably consistent evolved mind bottom with not that much gamma. But in other people, when I've seen that much amplitude at the bottom, then the gamma takes off and rides on top of it. So I don't know that looking at the scores is going to, in the end, tell us as much as we can see. Like this girl up at the top left, well, she's just blowing into the evolved mind flares.
Yeah, she does that a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know, this, even though their scores didn't seem as high, all of these are terrific patterns for all.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there. I was just thinking, might be something that we all might want to and pay attention to is that I've been very interested in lucid dreaming for quite some time. And I'm always curious to know what sort of pattern do we need to train for that will increase the amount of lucid dreaming? Or, how do we get people into a lucid dream? Part of it is, we need to increase gamma, but it sort of seems like if people can get into an alpha theta state, there it just went away. What's happening there?
Just like
Yeah.
she hit her head or something, because her EMG bar turned red.
Yeah, some artifact there. Yeah, if we can, if we have that kind of surfing the alpha theta edge, where you may have more theta than the alpha, but also maintaining a high gamma at the same time might be conducive to increasing dreaming or lucid dreaming. Because I really think this is where a lot of meditation work needs to go, is to develop the capability to get into lucid dreams and then be able to work with dream yoga as a meditational technique, which is not something that I find is really discussed much in Western meditations like MBSR or something like that. It's more a relaxation technique rather than a technique training awareness throughout all states. And that's more or less where I like to go with meditation, is training that awareness to be held throughout all states, so that you can get into basically deep delta sleep and still have full consciousness. So anyway, I'm just kind of curious to see, what we can do to train people to assist in that movement in that direction. If anybody has any thoughts on that, I haven't really come up with any easy solutions to it myself. Maybe Judith has seen something more. I don't know if you've worked more with anybody that's a lucid dreamer. See what sort of patterns they might have. I rarely run into them.
Well, two things come to mind for me. One is that in my own life, before I began to meditate, I was aware when I woke up in the morning, and sometimes when I would wake up in the middle of the dream lucidly, that my dreams were just a big messy jumble. They made no sense. There was no symbolic message that I could understand. It all seemed like those kinds of body dreams where you're being chased and stuff like that. But then once I started my meditative writings, and then later on got into a regular meditation practice, my dreams suddenly became meaningful. There was linearity to them. They were rich and vivid and colorful, and I could just go into the dream at will. Not every night. I mean, if I drink a lot of caffeine, well, then I'd have that crazy body dream. But mostly could dream lucidly, and always felt that was really the awakened mind pattern, with beta waking up in the meditation pattern, and that really was the same as the awakened mind pattern. And so it occurs to me that what would be a very cool study for us would be to start with some non-meditators who are not aware of their dreams, and teach them awakened mind meditation and see if they woke up in their dreams. Because if they did, then that'd be some pretty nice proof that lucid dreaming is the awakened mind pattern. And then the other thing that directly relates to this, and I've mentioned this before, and I'm pretty excited about it, as I've been working pretty closely with this Hawaiian psychiatrist, Richard Schuster. He's going to do a webinar for us. And he's about to publish a mind mirror study in a journal. And so I've been working with him to get the ratios and the languaging, and he has done record keeping like you've just shown us, Robin, where he's tracking through Excel people's patterns. And what he does is he's had a variety of I think it's 7 clients, and he's done a number of sessions with each of them. And he has them, and this is all with people who were blocked, who couldn't get a solution. They're all creative people, and they couldn't move forward in their various screenwriting or whatever brainstorming thing they were trying to do. And so I can't describe it. It's kind of complicated. He would break his sessions into like 4 different parts. But in one part, he would have the person go into a dream state and reaccess a dream fragment that they could remember. And he would have them work with the fragment, and sure enough, then the dream would unfold. And they could remember the dream, and the dream always related, as I found in my own 20, 30, 40 years of dream work, everything I would ever dream about directly related to what was going on in my life. And so you can consult that subconscious intelligence in the same way that we do in Awakened Mind meditation. And so that's what Richard was doing with these people. He would have them go into the dream, see the solution that the dream was providing to their block, and then have them envision or use the information to apply the insight to the block and then transfer it. That's so I can remember it. So information applied to clearing the block, seeing how to clear the block, and then coming out of the meditation. And over a period of time, they all developed much higher awakened mind scores and became more lucid in their dreams. So I agree with you, Gary. I think this is incredibly important, especially because lucid dreaming is associated with gamma, and he did see gamma increases. For the purposes of his paper, he had to just stick with the awakened mind, and he's going to do a follow-up paper, but very strong increases in gamma in every single one of these people, and ability, to clear their own blocks, of course, but certainly, why not use the time? We go to sleep 8 hours a night. I don't like wasting time. I'd rather just have these. And I used to teach dream interpretation, and so I would get at this community college, and we always had these fantastic classes, and it's so easy once you understand how to interpret a dream. It's so easy to interpret it. And my gosh, their strides in consciousness over the 6-week period of the class. We just met once a week, just showing them the awakened mind theory, having them understand how consciousness works, having them interpret their dreams, and then and so their dreams would get more and more profound. I mean, people's lives were literally saved. So I say, let's use that 8 hours and get somewhere and be awake when we're asleep. And
I worked with a therapeutic dream group quite a few years ago, but they used an interesting approach which did use interpretation, that it used dream process. So they would use let's say the amount of contact you had with people in your dream, the amount of feeling you had in your dream, the amount of expression you had in your dream, and the clarity of the dream, which in a sense is related to the meaning. But when you would come back out of the dream, their concept was that if you had little feeling in the dream, you weren't feeling much in your waking life. You weren't expressing that feeling. You might have a lot of expression but low feeling, or you might have a lot of feeling but low expression. And so they would work with, okay, you need to express more, or, you need to balance things out. So by working, I found with the various dream processes they have, rather than interpreting the dream, but bringing the expression or the feeling or the amount of contact you had with other people, rather than being isolated in your life, change the dreams. And the dreams would gradually become clearer and clearer, so that the dream would actually reflect the same people that you had in your waking life, and you would have the same sort of expression and contact with the people in your dreams that you had in your waking life. And if there was something that happened in your dream, then you would take that back out and talk to your friends or your group or whoever it was in the dream that needed to be, you needed to have more contact with or more expression with. And the group itself, since everybody was doing the same thing, would work with each other in helping you to do that. So it was a totally different approach to trying to figure out what the meaning of the dream was. The meaning of the dream was how much expression or feeling or contact or other processes that you had in the dream. So that also seemed to bring about increase in lucidity. And a much clearer, it seems like if you were working, say, with Jungian archetypes and so on, the dreams become more and more symbolic and more complicated, and it's you tend to go into that sort of mythic realm rather than coming back out into your dreams reflecting your normal waking life. And so that, by doing that, then also the dream lucidity increased. Unfortunately, nobody at the time was monitoring brainwaves, so we didn't know what was going on there. But it was a therapeutic community, and it was guided by several dozen therapists at the time. So it was an interesting experience, and I highly recommend that approach, along possibly with interpretation as well, depending on what the needs might be at the time. So that's another way of working with things.
I would love to see us. I would love to see like the awakened mind practitioners who were willing to start a group like Robin's got here, with several people, and we could come up with a protocol, a training protocol, and not do like Richard's doing, where you're in meditation. Well, I guess you could, reviewing lucid dream, but certainly using awakened mind training to see if we could get some data on that being an awakener for people in terms of increasing their lucid dreaming. That would be pretty cool. I mean, that'd be simple enough to do.
And you're saying to actually have a dream work group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then monitor the changes in brain waves as they're doing dream work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
That would be.
Judith. And what about Monroe Institute? Do they have some data? Or will you maybe possibly get some data more related to lucid dreaming through their work, or it's not related?
Well, the trick for Monroe Institute is, as Gary and I were discussing the other night, is that people, when they start drifting down, probably driven there by the binaural beats or in training to the binaural beats, they tend to click out, so really the challenge for Monroe people, because they're going so far down into the subconscious and the unconscious, is for them to be awake. so in a sense, yeah, it is a lucid dreaming. And now we get into all kinds of interesting concepts and conversations about what is reality, because where are they going when they as I did, go out of body and go to another planet and just get these pictures, click out, I'm out, wake up, wow, I'm flying over a mountaintop and there's some trees missing, and wait, why am I flying over it? Can I land? Boom, I'm down there looking at some leaves and looking at some flowers, click, so where are you going when you click out? And what are those visions? Are those lucid dreams? Are they an actual other realm? So to answer your question, I don't know what we're going to see there. But what's going to be fascinating is making that subjective objective match. If we can match those, must be vast brainwave changes to these vast changes in consciousness. It's going to be.
Are you going to be able to monitor your own brainwaves while you're there on a mind mirror?
For myself, you mean?
Yeah.
I could probably.
You're going to the Monroe Institute, right?
Yeah, but we're gonna monitor. Robin and Laura and I are gonna monitor this group, this training group.
Okay. So you are monitoring other people while
Yeah,
they're doing it.
yeah, and potentially 12 or more.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, maybe we'll have some more concrete data on that when you get back.
Yeah. And so I don't know, is it a lucid dream when you're flying over a mountain? I don't know, because it's so constant. Whereas in a lucid dream at night when I'm flying, it's constant too. And it's definitely a higher state of consciousness because of the things that are happening in that circumstance that I'm learning while I'm flying. So I don't know. I don't really. It's just some fascinating questions, though. I think we got a lot more questions than we have answers.
Well, it's interesting too if people can identify concretely whether they've been somewhere that somebody else can corroborate, or they can corroborate where they've been based on information when they click out. So I'm always interested in hearing that piece.
Yeah.
Because it seems like there's a difference between like what you're describing, Judith, which is like just going either to another planet or another place, and you don't know where it is, versus, being above your house and then going over to another location and seeing people and hearing people and what's that about?
Yeah, that makes more sense to me too. And in fact, when I reported that to the group, somebody had been out walking and right by the Monroe Institute said that they had walked through an area on a mountain that was exactly like I described it, with the burnt out place with the woods and stuff. So I'm into the corroboration too.
So doesn't Monroe have something like 20 or 40 or something different levels that you can go through depending on your state of meditation and guidance and so on?
Seems that dimensions. It's really dimensions.
Yeah, dimensions, astral, causal, whatever dimensions it may be.
There's 40. There are 40 of those.
Something like that. It's been a while since I've read his books, but it seems like I remember all of these different levels of dimensions that you would go to, depending on where you were, what was happening to you. When you came back, you would describe them, and they say, "Oh, you were at level X, Y, Z, whatever it might be." So yeah, and there's you go through all these dimensions, and eventually, some people get into that clear white light at the very highest dimensions. So it's who knows? I don't know exactly where they're going with their training.
But I mean, the first time I heard, until I went there, I thought, yeah, sure, you're helping somebody a spirit who got lost. You're helping them cross over and find the light. Yeah. But then when I actually got over there and started traveling around, they had this level Focus 21. I kept trying to see Anna. I said, they said, pick a deceased person that you want to connect with. And how you do it is you go up the level, and they say cross a bridge and then go into a park. Well, every time I got into the park, there's nobody there. I was totally bummed out. But and I never did, and still I've got their CDs and I listen. There's never anybody in the park. So my meditative writing say, "Oh, don't sweat it. That's not what you're supposed to be doing." But still, I had this sense that that I was moving into those realms, because as the week progressed and I understood what the click out is about, and it's about, you have to not eat heavily at lunch, and you have to get out and walk, and you have to get your metabolism up first of all, so you're not sleepy, and so you can stay awake. As the week progressed and I started moving into the click out realm, I wasn't clicking out, and I was surfing around, and there were people there, and there were conversations, and some of them turned around and looked at me, and I looked at them and said, okay, so there's some real stuff here. You really do, and it's not made up.
This brings up a number of dream studies that have been done over the years, which is fascinating, and have been replicated to a certain extent. But one of them was a shared dreaming, where everybody in the group who never met each other, they were spread around the country. They would record their dreams on a certain night each month. They would send that in. Maybe you've heard this study, where they would send it into a central, so one person who was like the dream weaver, and they would take the elements of all of the different dreams, weave them into another story, send that back to everybody, and then people would read that story over, and the next time they went into a dream, they would try to dream that story. They would hold that in their mind as they're falling asleep. Well, within a year's time, and just doing this probably, a total of 12 times over the months, they begin to see each other in the dreams. Without knowing who they were, and it wasn't until later that they saw pictures of each other and were informed who the other people were. They were going, "Oh, yeah, I saw you in this dream," And then I was just reading about shared lucid dreaming, which a number of people have done, and being able to get, when two people get into a lucid dream, then if they've agreed on this to begin with, they can, at a particular point, as you're saying, Judith, they meet each other and have conversations. And one story I found amusing years ago was that a couple were trying to do this, and they were boyfriend, girlfriend, and they were not living together at the time. And they had been trying for some time. And then the guy remembered all of a sudden that he went into a lucid dream, and his girlfriend was sitting next to the bed, and he was saying, remember, wake up, we're in a dream. And repeating this to her. And then the next day she reported to him, she said, "I had this strange dream about you jumping up and down on your bed, yelling at me to wake up, wake up, wake up." So, there is this ability, if you want to call it psychic or whatever it is, that we can eventually begin to share our dreams. I mean, the Sonoy reportedly do this all the time, where they would have a group dream. Everybody would take the dream weaver, would put together the elements of the dream, and that would be what they would do for the day. Some people would dream, well, there's water here, there's some plants over here we need to get, we need to go and meet somebody over here, and they would, it would all come true. It was exactly what they so there's, this whole element, this whole realm of dreaming and lucid dreaming and shared dreaming is something that is sort of almost beyond, you talk to a physicist about that, and they're going to go, "Oh, pooh, it's never going to happen." But on the other hand, we know that it does. We have these experiences, and we need to, in some way, experiment with them and look at them and to bring them into, the sort of general knowledge of the populace. And I think having hard data like brainwave patterns and, the EEGs and so on, we can, maybe convince a few more people that these things are real and we have the possibility. So, if you can find patterns of people who are going into level 21 or whatever it may be, focus 21, focus 2 or whatever it may be, and begin to identify that and begin to train for that in a different way than the Monroe people are doing it, bringing just brainwave patterns and getting people there, that'd be fascinating. Love to see.
It would indeed. And to bring us back to what you're doing here, Robin, this woman who had this went into this shamanic thing, and she starts losing her patterns. That would be a really good thing or unless she's the one who's leaving.
No, she's going to be here.
Yeah, so she'd be a cool one to watch. I tell you, that's one thing I'm sorry about, is that when you've got 4 people on one, that you then don't, unless we could somehow rig not a trigger button, but something else, but then that would jerk them back in.
I've tried to do the trigger buttons and nobody can stand it. It just, they just don't want to move. I did have a question though about shifting from, typically this pattern up here is what people look like for a long time. And with beta being 15 and not so much up here, it occasionally will flash up. But what I'm noticing is more often now we're having 19 showing up as the peak brainwave pattern. And I'm just wondering what that means in terms of Anna Wise's theory. Is that...
You want to take that, Gary?
Yeah, in terms of what Anna Wise has to say about it, I don't know. This is a frequency range, from say 13 to 20 in the low beta, the beta 1 range that we want to maintain as people develop theta, so that they don't lose consciousness. So as you get more and more theta, and if you get the theta breakthrough, where the theta actually gets bigger than the alpha, say you have enough alpha in there, but you also get the theta is larger in amplitude, you need to have that range in there from about 13 to 20 to maintain awareness of what's happening to you. If you lose that, then I think you may lose the alpha, but if you lose that beta in there, then you may have the sense of something happened, but I'm not quite sure what it was. You can't really bring it fully into awareness. You get a lot of theta going. Anyway, that's just sort of experience that I've seen, though I don't know specifically what Anna would have to say about that.
Yeah, that's a good insight. And I guess I could add one little thing to it. It's like in your bottom right person where we see that 19 and pushing out that 15 on the right. I have noticed that some people, that 19 tends to be a driver for the top half of an evolved mind. Like if you were to left click somewhere on the screen or put it back and resume and then left click and then go one frame at a time, you might see that 19 about to drive out an evolved mind up on the top. Maybe just one frame at a time, or just resume, either way.
Yeah, you just about had that up on the
there it is.
Right.
So she's
but you had a bigger 19. There we go.
Yeah, it's driving an evolved mind in some people. Now, for some people, it's just that they're talking too much. But 9 times out of 10, when I see that 19, it's I don't know what it is. I think it's just a peak frequency that's just, it's like I'm getting higher, I'm getting higher, hello. And now I'm in the evolved mind, but the 19 seems to be driving it out sometimes.
Well, so because I did notice that with my folks that we worked on developing the theta and delta a little bit more because a lot of people had a constriction here at 7.5. And so we were working to open that up. And then after you would see more channeling patterns, then we started to see more things like this, where you would see 19 pushing out more.
And so talk about the idea that these are trauma clients. I know Magda had a question about that. So would you say that that the kind of hallmark of these people as a trauma client would have been initially a restricted theta where they were afraid to go into the theta, or would it be that they would have a big theta because there was stuff there? What can you say about the brainwaves of them as former trauma?
I would say that to start with, mostly you would see that kind of mushroom pattern with more on top and a constriction with theta and delta. And that it would look like a, rounded top or a triangle peak, and then very straight down with the theta and delta, a big gap between the alpha and the theta. So now, and we worked a lot with going down into theta and using some theta language with a lot of the theta prepositional language. And that really helped everybody to develop more theta, and really just talking about it would develop more theta. We had a day where people were asking about gamma, and after talking about gamma, everybody was making more gamma. And another day after talking about how to make more theta, everybody was making more theta. And it seems to then be kind of permanent. I mean, it's amazing how that works. So that's what I'm seeing more, is a increasing of the 19 versus the 15, as after the theta and delta has opened up a little bit. And so I'm just wondering about whether they're now going to push up more into gamma and have a different kind of experience.
I would say so. I would say so. Well, now the 19 is the peak frequency in beta. So you would expect it to be slightly more pushed out than the other beta bars, but not much. Yeah, I mean, and we do see this. We see this when you've got an increase in gamma. So you're looking at a gamma summary window, and the gamma starts going up, then the governance does seem to be that they're maintaining that evolved mind bottom, but it's being, the mirror of it seems to be driven out by that 19 band on the top, which is like the top is then trying to match the bottom.
Okay.
But then the codicil here is that, again, I'm working with psychics and intuitives and advanced meditators. So does that principle apply to trauma people? Because then there would be a difference in the person's openness and receptivity, you know, their willingness to deal with the material of the mind. Now, I suspect that because you have set that climate, that they are more willing. And so maybe the governing principles would be the same for those two populations. But
well, I think too, it would depend on how much trauma therapy somebody's had, and everybody in this group's had a lot and are doing pretty well mostly. So I think that makes a big difference as to whether they would follow that pattern or not.
Magda, did you have a specific question you wanted to ask Robin about trauma?
Yes, actually I had 2 or 3 questions. My first question is about, like, trauma people have a tendency to dissociate. And I know some of the meditation actually increase that tendency. Don't you think so? That was my first question. So the risk of actually with the meditation having increasing that tendency that people with trauma have to dissociate.
Yeah, I actually, if people are meditating and have learned how to sensualize, which means to be grounded in the body and to feel the body and to practice different focal points inside the body and outside of the body, I don't find that happens for them at all during the meditation that we do. I would suspect that would be a fear response with somebody who is not used to going inside, and maybe that there's some information that they are afraid to deal with. They might then dissociate away from it. But my experience has been just the opposite. In fact, I had a client that I didn't realize for quite a long time had never been in her body, and had actually through her entire life witnessed the world from outside and above her body. And it was through meditation that she surprisingly fell back into her body and for the first time saw the world through her own eyes. So, which was startling, because everything felt like it was in her face. Everything was magnified. So my experience has been just the opposite, that if there's a proper meditation training, it's a safeguard to unwanted dissociation.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. And I saw that you do like more classical neurofeedback as well, like with the, I suppose, inhibit reward system.
Mm-hmm.
What made you sort of try the mind mirror, and what would be, according to you, maybe like the advantage of working with a system like the mind mirror as opposed to compared to the more classical neurofeedback?
I'm not sure how to answer that exactly. I think they're really directed at different goals. And when we're doing traditional neurofeedback, there may be a specific pattern that we're trying to help someone undo or achieve. And they're not intentionally engaging in the process so much as allowing it to happen. The feedback helps their brain find the place. And we may or may not be doing psychotherapy alongside of that. And it can be a more mechanistic process. I also do a lot of alpha theta training or alpha synchrony training, which is a lot more like the mind mirror training, from my perspective, which is more meditative, and we go into internal journeys in that process and imagery. So I think my experience with working with Linda Tellington-Jones and the awakened mind states in animals and people is what really piqued my interest in using the mind mirror, because the goal is different and we can see patterns in a different way. My equipment, you can't visualize what's happening inside somebody as they're meditating with the equipment that I have. The software doesn't provide the same kind of imagery that you can follow. It provides other things, but it just doesn't allow this process to be so easy.
I think, just as an aside, one thing that Anna always stressed was that we did not diagnose or prescribe treatment for anything. Whereas in the clinical neurofeedback, you're diagnosing brainwave function, comparing it to a large data group, and attempting to shape the brainwaves back into, let's say, the norm or normal functioning. Whereas the awakened mind training is a meditation training, and it simply allows the mind or the brain to begin to fall back into its normal pattern of functioning without giving it any particular direction, so that you're increasing alpha, theta, delta, you're getting a better pattern, and the mind is doing that, or the brain is doing that all on its own without any feedback other than some guidance in the meditations. For instance, if you do Swangel's clinical cue, you would actually be diagnosing a set of brainwave patterns and the interrelationship of where those brainwave patterns are occurring, and then you would go back and you would do specific feedback into those areas and try to shape the performance of the brain back to what he would consider to be a normal pattern. That simply doesn't happen with the mind mirror. We're not really concerned about that. So if you have a result which is healing by developing the brainwave pattern into an awakened mind pattern, that's almost fortuitous and not the objective of what we're doing.
And I think that there are, it's kind of a process where, at least with my experience, people may need some help, more help than you can get through meditation, because a lot of my clients can't sustain a meditative state because they have either too much anxiety or too much dissociation, or they have seizure-like activity, I just recently was working with a 6-year-old who could easily be described as hyperactive, but when we did his QEEG, what we found out was that he had a right frontal spike and wave pattern, which was really producing a lot of the impulsivity. And that wouldn't be able to be changed very quickly with the mind mirror meditation training for a child like that. But if we do traditional neurofeedback, we can establish calm much more quickly in the body, and we can stop that spike and wave pattern. And then you'll see that the brain can move on to continue to grow and balance itself over time. So I think that I look at the mind mirror work as something that my clients can do after they've done the traditional neurofeedback training. And then some people, of course, will never do neurofeedback training because they're just interested in meditation. So, but that's how I see it it's on the spectrum.
I agree with you there, Robin. The Awakened Mind training is more a process of optimizing brain function rather than bringing it back to normal again, which is clinical work does. So once you're back to square one and the brain is functioning normally, then you want to go on with optimization, which the Awakened Mind pattern training does.
That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, it's often the case with people with trauma is that they have so much anxiety that sometimes they just have the patience or the time to work with the mind mirror, because with the mind mirror, I suppose it would take much longer for them to sort of quiet down.
Well, I don't know. It depends on certainly what the cause of the anxiety is as to whether, it's going to take a long time or not. But I think with the feedback that is now available for clients, I think that their meditation can be moved along more quickly because their brain is being given some information about when they're establishing those brainwave states. So I would think it would be really helpful and could move the meditation training along. Okay. I would just want to know that before doing a lot of meditation work, that a client can sit comfortably and feel safe in their body. We're really struggling with that with some of my clients, and it's really hard to trust allowing yourself to open up if you are uncomfortable as you're just sitting in your body.
I think, hasn't Andrea mentioned that she uses the quick clinical cue just to sort people out to begin with before she begins training, and looks at their brainwave pattern from a clinical perspective, and then if they need more, then she sends them on to someone else who's doing the clinical work that's necessary before she actually begins even with the Awakened Mind training.
I know that Andrea is using running a swingle on private clients before she works with them, and not all Awakened Mind practitioners want to do that, because our assumption is that this work is for meditation and consciousness training, and unless you're a clinical psychologist or like Robin is, or a neurofeedback person, it's pretty well understood by clients that they're coming to you for a meditation and consciousness training. And rather than get involved in the whole thing with the swingle, you could just simply do an intake with people and ask them what is their experience. And I've developed a very simple form that asks very simple questions. Do you have a meditation practice? How long have you been meditating? Is your meditation practice successful? Have you ever had a brain injury or been treated for it? Do you have, are you being treated for, or do you have an active addiction, things like that? And by the time you answer a few simple, and epilepsy, that's a big one we want to ask them, as well as have you been diagnosed for or had open heart surgery? So there are some contraindications that get covered on that client intake form. And by the time you have the answers to those questions, you're going to pretty much know whether somebody's going to have an anomaly on a swingle, because they're going to say, well, you know, but like this woman did at a workshop of mine one time, I had this feeling that I was going to see some gamma with her. She was in front of this big group of 80 people in Chicago. And I said, have you ever had just intuitively, have you ever had a brain injury? And she said, no, but I've been having terrible, terrible headaches. And I'm just about to go and see a neurophysiologist. And sure enough, I hooked her up and she had this massive gamma. And she was meditating 3 and 4 hours a day. And I said, oh, I better pull that back. And she did, and the headaches went away. So people know from their internal experience whether they're having trouble. So I wouldn't say you need to do a swingle for every private client. Simply, really, an intake form should do the trick, because they're going to self-report, like that woman did, a serious anomaly. But if you wanted to do the swingle, then that would be 10 times more thorough.
I work a lot with highly sensitive people, and they also have a lot of trouble most of the time with noises that are too loud, light that is too bright. Is there any way we can do something about this by working with the mind mirror?
Yeah, the biggest one is to get them down into theta meditations, which are going to ground them and reduce that gamma that's probably about gamma. That I've seen that ever since we got this mind mirror and started looking at the upper 2 frequencies, that there's a direct correlation, almost unfailingly, with psychic people who have lots of psychic empathy, or they do healing work. They're going to have that gamma. And the only way to get them to feel, and this is self-reported for them as being their solution, for them to not feel that big gamma and that hypersensitivity, is to get them down into theta, and then they start feeling what it feels like to be in the awakened mind pattern. And that is the psychic pattern, but it's also the peak performance pattern of someone who's grounded. So if they, and you've all been loved by whoever that was in my house. Someone yelled, "Love you." Yeah, so if they can get down into that theta, they're good old alpha theta, and then they say that they feel grounded, and oh my gosh, I'm not so nervous anymore, and that's invariable.
Judith, have you had a chance to look at these people with your 100 hertz harness that you've got there to see how high it's actually going?
I have not, and not only that, it's not in the mind mirror display yet. This is something that Steve Clark has yet to do for us, because he's been dedicating all of his time and attention to stopping the
interference.
You remember we did this program on it, and I was saying, oh, I think we're going to have some problems with this new sensor. And sure enough, all that did come to pass. And so Steve had to first create the new legacy thing that gets this super gamma down into a pattern we can recognize. And then he had to work on the compatibility issue. So his next step is to add the frequencies into the mind mirror pattern, and we talked back and forth about it half a dozen times, and right now the plan is that he's going to let us determine how we want to look at the bands, how many frequencies in each bar from 64 to 100. And so until we can do that, the only way we can look at it is the raw data, like in some vertical bars. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of useful, but we really want to start looking for a template inside the mind mirror that we can interpret. So no, I'm not looking at anybody. But okay, with this Monroe study, certainly I'll be looking at those raw data bars. You know what, now that you mention that though, I think I should just start trying to speed Steve up with that.
Yeah, lights fire under his feet
Monroe.
there.
Yeah, we want to get that done before Monroe, because then we could look at those higher frequency bars.
And I think that would probably be very interesting, if not important.
Thank you for that. Good idea. This has turned out to be a working group, but I sure appreciate all the good work. Did you have any other questions about trauma?
No, thank you.
Well, I would just say, Robin, I think it's marvelous that that you're using the neurofeedback to help your clients move more into the normal range. And once you get there, it's quite brilliant that they're taking them to, you know, consciousness training, which is increasing their self-awareness and grounding them. You know, you got that one client, you reported that she's feeling more grounded and not quite so nervous all the time. And how beautiful that we have the mind mirror in the first place, that can take people from the normal range to the supernormal range. But also how beautiful that there are people like you who know what to do to get people from those really very painful and excruciatingly well, just painful, excruciatingly painful states of consciousness where nothing's right in the world and everything's wrong.
Judith, may I say a word? Because I had like an insight today that once again, Mind Mirror allows us to see the kind of collective field, what's going on. And I thought, watching the group, you know, presented by Robin, I thought it could be even a great healing group when you have like long-term meditators and healers and people really well established in, you know, well grounded, and they could invite someone who is in big trouble. And imagine if you are sitting in the field of people who are really radiating all these nice high frequencies, and I'm definitely, sure that it will help the troubled person to get back to, you know, where they are. He will just follow the field, and that's where group effect will come into place. And you can even organize such things on purpose. I was even thinking, what if you call all this yoga nidra people very experienced and someone troubling, you know, with relaxation? I'm sure he'll have to follow.
You know,
it will be very difficult to stay behind.
That's a brilliant idea, Oksana. And Robin, maybe you could help with this language for this, because we are going to ask people at the Monroe Institute to fill out a questionnaire about their meditation and spiritual practices. And why shouldn't we just add a couple of questions on a scale? Well, actually, we've already got that form that Ghislaine Salafranc did for us, that auto-evaluation, where there's 4 slider bars going from 0 to 10, and 1 is for physical, 1 emotional, 1 mental, and 1 spiritual. We could have people fill that out before their Monroe. That's a great idea. Before each meditation, whether they're hooked up to the Mind Mirror or not, that would give Monroe some good experience, good information. But one of the aspects of the studies is not just that people would be in their cubicles hooked up to the Mind Mirror and listening to the SAM, spatial angular modulation, their new actually gamma facilitating, but they're also want to monitor people during the afternoon break as a group. So we would be able to do exactly what you said there, Oksana, where if we had that filled out and they auto-evaluated my physical, mental, spiritual is terrible, whether they're hooked up or not, especially if they're hooked up, and then they say 10, well, then that field has had a change. It has made a difference for them. Mm-hmm. We should be able to, we'll see it on the Mind Mirror, because we do see that all the time on the Mind Mirror, those field effects, even if it's only 2 people.
Right, and I think there certainly that my clients have already described the experiencing of that in the group, where it feels like there's a field that they are all a part of. And sometimes they can describe that they felt connected to a particular individual in a certain way during a meditation, or that the whole group felt a certain way. And I think that's the power of being able to meditate in the group, is that the group does generate a field.
Yeah, yeah, and there should be clear leaders, you know, someone taking others behind and holding the field, you know, people with like really, you know, big amplitudes, and they're quite powerful. They can hold the field for, I know, large groups even without any problem. I mean, I met such people at least here. And I thought, Judith, just to add to your thing, maybe you should also add a question about lucid dreaming, and you can recruit a little experimental group for later. Just offer them, we would like to study that more. So if you had some experience, we would like to know, you know, that you had it, and we may... And if you're interested to research it as well with us. And when you were talking about it, I thought another way to approach lucid dreaming could be, of course, it's hard to measure while people are asleep. But as Robin mentioned, as soon as you start talking about it, as soon as you start thinking, sensing, it takes you back to that place, to that space where they are, where they were, while they were in their lucid dreaming. And like my clear good example is experience with Andrea, because while we were doing my heart rate variability test, I suddenly imagined, or not imagined, I found myself back in my dream where I, you know, one of my lucid dreams, when I'm flying and singing, and there are no words there, it's really soul singing, because you feel great. And I had this perfect, you know, heart rate variability established while I was, you know, thinking about that. You know, going back to that state in my dream, because she said, just feel about this nice state, whatever it is related to. And I immediately went to my dream and I said, Andrea, wasn't it amazing that I picked singing, and she's singing teacher out of the blue? And then I picked something which is, you know, not from real life, but from my dreams. No explanation, but that's how it works. So that could be also a clue if you have people and ask them, okay, go back to one of your brightest or, you know, nicest lucid dreams, and let's see what's going on with you there, and measure all the indicators, and I'm sure it will show us something too.
This is really exciting for me, because every now and then you end up with multiple realities coming together, and that's what's happened here today. We've had this awesome experience of you as the conduit, Robin, and presenting your program, and then bringing in all kinds of interesting ideas, from shamanic and interdimensional travel to the Monroe Institute to trauma, and Oksana now bringing in field, and all of this, we're going to be able to connect into this Monroe study. And this is just really exciting. I will certainly work with you, Oksana, and Robin, and Gary, and Magda, if you like, to come up with some more questions, intake questions and outtake questions, that will really provide them with some terrific information, and us too. And I think for Magda, it's midnight there now in Belgium, so we've got to end our program. But just before we do, want to say how excited we are, Gary, that you are going to do a program on June the, what is it, what is it, Oksana? Is it 13th?
Yeah.
No, you're on a Sunday, right?
What is it?
Yeah, the 4th, June the 4th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which was 4 Eastern, 1, 2, 3, 4, right. And so Oksana and I will be getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I was trying to arrange it so that Oksana wouldn't have to be up all night. But it's kind of hard coordinating Australia with Europe. So
I know. No,
if you
that's fine. Anything after 6 is fine, but before that, it's a bit extreme. I mean, if you start at 5, it means I get to wake up at 4, and it's like.
That's right. Yeah, that's 17 hours there. Yeah, we'll be discussing EFT, emotional freedom technique, which is something that we generally introduce in whenever we start training in meditation, because of the possibility of theta breakthrough and that emotional issues will come up. In fact, almost inevitably in a large group. Anna used to spend hours, just talking people back down again after some emotional trauma would come up. And it's so much quicker if everybody's simply trained in tapping and, knows how to at least do the basics of that.
Yeah.
Calm themselves back down again. It may not resolve the issues, but at least it's a good calming technique.
I think that's wonderful. Whenever we have somebody that is totally out of control at some point in a session, that's what I do too. It's the fastest way to regain stability.
Yeah, some sort of composure on that.
Yeah.
And so we've seen actually some very dramatic improvements and changes with just the EFT techniques, and we've been able to monitor some brain waves of people as they're being tapped on, and as well as the tapper and the tappee. So we've worked with some of the EFT masters as they work on people, and so we've been able to see both of their brainwave changes.
Oh, cool.
So we look forward to your program.
That sounds wonderful.
And then we have Eureka Times coming out very soon. And I did an interview with Gary and Donna, and that was really fun and interesting. So
the only unfortunate thing is that most of this work that we did was with the old Mind Mirror 3. So we don't have the records. We have a few drawings that we can share, but it'll mostly be our descriptions of what we were seeing. So this recent conference that we were at in Lyon is, let's say it was more introductory to energy psychology for everybody that was there, and more introductory for Mind Mirror work. Nobody was really familiar with it. And everybody was quite excited about it. In fact, there are a couple of people from Lyon coming to study or get the equipment from Judith a little bit later this year. So it's...
and bought Mind Mirrors.
Yeah, they bought Mind Mirrors, and they're quite excited about having us come back. They've already scheduled us for April of next year to come back, and they're trying to set up another couple of conferences just exclusively for the Mind Mirror in France, coming up later this year, I think. I haven't had a chance to talk to them about that. So anyway.
I'm sure it will be inspiring for others. Like today's, presentation of a weekly group, it may be inspiring for other practitioners to start the same, or, as I said, try to do research or try all these mixed groups. And EFT may inspire others to try, and do it on Mind Mirror 6 and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Magda. Thank you.
Robin, just a reminder, if you have any templates you'd like to share, you can just send them to Oksana, and she can
I will distribute it to everyone and attach to the video.
Not that Oksana has anything to do, so she's... I just throw a little more work at her.
Thank you.
Bye.
All of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks a million.
Thanks. Thank you.